Welcome to the NY Patriot Show. And finally, I cannot be happier enough to get these two gentlemen together and to continue on this very weird topic. And this is part 4 of the Idaho 4. And I actually, this time I did change it. I put Brian Kohberger didn't do it with a question mark. Maybe that'll be a little bit easier for some people to take instead of the exclamation point. But yeah, I'm very happy to finally get back to this topic. This is something that all three of us have been chatting about and talking about since the last time. So I think this is going to be a real good one. And there is other shows out there that I'll make sure that I give credit for. They've come out with some really good, interesting research, I think, since the last time. So without further ado, this is the Idaho 4. Brian Kohberger didn't do it, and I got Ron and I got JJ with me again. Ron, why don't you go first and let everybody know what's up and where they can find all your other stuff before we get going?
Yeah, thank you, NY. I'm Sir Ron from New England from the Wicked Planet podcast, and just want to thank you for bringing me on again for the 4th installment of this series, which has been very interesting. And I'm easy to find. Just go look up the Wicked Planet podcast or go on Instagram and look for Ron from New England, all one word. And thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thank you. And JJ, let everybody know what's up with you.
Nick, Ron, nice to see you folks again. And folks of the interwebs, thanks for joining us for this conversation. JJ Vance, just wanted to introduce some of my podcasts, the Operation GCD podcast. For those not familiar, located anywhere podcasts are found. And I'm on Twitter and Instagram under at Twitter or X at Operation GCD. And then on Twitter, Instagram at Operation_GCD. And I also have a Substack I just started in regards to the Idaho 4 murders, and that's operationgcd.substack. And I'll send the links to Nick so he can put them in the show notes. Awesome. But that series I've entitled based upon a quote here out of the case of the Idaho 4 murders. That's was what the police, the Moscow police, declared immediately following the murders back on their first press conference on November 16th of last year. They declared the homicides an isolated targeted attack. And that's what I've made my series. Kind of, I'm trying to put all of my thoughts and ideas here we've discussed on our previous shows and shows today here, and trying to put all those thoughts and ideas into a more cogent sight picture of the Idaho 4 case, and the case which I would assert as states, based upon the state's own evidence, that Kohberger did not do it. So I'm fairly upfront with my assertion in that series that law enforcement has bungled this case. There is a great injustice present, and I actually would argue that justice needs to be served for these victims, and to stop violating suspect Kohberger's rights. Those are kind of my points on that. But looking forward to the conversation. Thanks again for the invite, and of
course,
great to see you folks again here today.
Of course, yeah. No, thank you. I think this has been a great series. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know where you guys want to start with this one. I know since the last one, there has been some pretty good, I think, research done between us and just even other shows that I've come across. So, I mean, I know, like I said, I put a question mark, but honestly, the more and more time that goes on, even between us covering this, I do even think this is just more weirder and shadier, and something is really wrong.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, if I may tee off a topic that we've discussed kind of previously,
sure,
in our previous discussions, Ron, I know, has focused on it. I focused on it. You have as well, Nick. So we've all kind of asked the same question: how did they get to Kohberger in the first place? We've had various discussions since our last discussion. Kohberger's defense counsel is actually asking that point blank to the state, as the state continues to block discovery and continues to play these lawfare games, as we discussed last time, Ron. There's a lot more lawfare going on now. In the case, and part of that is the push to now just blatantly asking, well, outright stating the state that Kohberger's defense counsel is outright stating the state of Idaho authorities have basically someone has planted this DNA evidence, right? They haven't said necessarily planted the sheath, but they're asserting that someone's planted this evidence in part of this discovery back and forth. And the state's played a bunch of games we can get to later as well in the discussion of the DNA evidence. But just up front, they're really focusing on how did they get to Kohberger part of the investigation, right? And we've all asked that same question. And Nick and I were back and forth. And Ron, you may have seen some of the messages, kind of putting it on a chronological timeline. It makes no sense how they got to Kohberger, because if you compare what law enforcement authorities stated in the affidavits and filings from court, how did they proceeded with the investigation after November, we'll call it November 29th, because that's the date in their own documents that they identified Kohberger as a person of interest. But they did that by using his 2015 white Hyundai Elantra, while at the same time they're looking for a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. So it makes no sense then 8 days later on December 7th, they asked for public assistance, widely broadcasted, every news media outlet, everything, looking for public assistance to speak to the occupant or occupants of a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. So if you look at that objectively, why in the world would they be flooding their tip line? Literally they said tens of thousands of calls, right, per this request for tips, when 9 days prior they had already, according to their own documents, had identified Kohberger via his 2015 white Hyundai Elantra. So not only should they not be looking for a white Hyundai Elantra at that point, they shouldn't be looking for a 2011 to 2013, because they've already got Kohberger. They've had him for 9 days as a person of interest, right? And then you go one step further and look at the documents and the affidavits and see how law enforcement proceeded with other suspects or persons of interest in the case, right? Whereas they interviewed these people, took DNA samples, right, or requested them, and got them otherwise if the person didn't give them up, right? They followed one guy around, got a cigarette butt, supposedly. This is according to the own narrative and the affidavits by law enforcement. And they didn't do any of that with Kohberger, right? So they have Kohberger as a suspect. He's on campus until December 14th, right? So for over 15 days, they don't question the man. They don't ask him for his DNA. Instead, there's this whole nationwide manhunt for the guy that never really occurred, right? Indiana authorities said no one ever told them to pull him over. FBI never chased him across the United States, as was widely reported by media, right? So then all of these factors collectively ask the question, how did they get to Kohberger? Because clearly their own narrative shows that they did not get to Kohberger in any legitimate or objective way, right?
I didn't even realize that when the bolo went out for that, it even covered the area that he went to school in. So I mean, I don't know. Like, I just was surprised by that. It was only like 8.3 miles away, right?
Yeah, the campuses, the cities are very much function as one. I mean,
because that's supposedly where they identified the car, actually, according to,
was on the Washington State campus, right? You're
right. Yeah.
Strangely enough, and I think this just speaks to them trying to say we really got the right guy, because two different officers in Pullman, Washington, identified, or Washington State University Police identified his white Hyundai Elantra on campus within 30 minutes of each other, allegedly independently of one another. Two different officers identified him on November. But again, this is November 29th. So if they already have him, they don't question him for the next 15 days. They let him leave the state. They don't ask him for DNA like they questioned and asked these other suspects or persons of interest for DNA, right? So comparatively speaking, the way their investigation, according to their own records, approached is widely different than the way they handled it versus allegedly against Kohberger, right? And on top of that, again, if they're identifying him via this 2015 Elantra on the campus, two different officers, right, within 30 minutes of each other independently, as the story goes, just to make, I think that, again, that they're just trying to drive home, we really got this guy, right? But again, if they got him in the 2015 on November 29th, the 2015 Elantra, why would they flood their tip lines with tens of thousands of calls on December 7th for a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, right? You tracking what I'm saying? It doesn't make any objective sense. It's not helping your investigation. If anything, it's providing a great hindrance to your investigation.
Well,
and again, what are you looking for? You already got the guy. You already identified him 9 days prior. Why are you asking for questions? Why are you asking for tips?
What I don't understand is, like, even if you go by, like, when they thought that they knew that they had the guy, why did you let so much time go by and never once question? Like you were saying,
exactly, yeah.
You question all these other people that you were just random chance just checking out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a great point, because there's no clear indicator that those other suspects or persons of interest that were questioned, that did have their DNA tested, right? There's no clear indication that any of those individuals drove a white Hyundai Elantra, right? So if they're looking for this white Hyundai Elantra as a key aspect of their suspect, Why are you inquiring with suspects who don't drive a white Hyundai Elantra? Why are you getting their DNA? But then you're not getting the DNA and questioning the individual who does drive a white Hyundai Elantra, Kohberger, right? It doesn't make, you're right, it doesn't make any sense.
Another thing
and it also begs the question is, once again, did they question any of the other approximately 94 owners of registered parking passes on both college campuses, Washington State and the University of Idaho? Were those other approximate 94 owners questioned in the search for the owner occupants of this white Hyundai Elantra? Because there's no clear indicator that ever occurred either in their own documents.
Yeah, see, I had brought that up before.
Right.
If there was so many white Elantras registered or, on either campus, did they take the time to go through and interview these people? Even if it was just something quick, like, hey, your vehicle matches the description of one that we're looking for. I just got a few questions for you. And what their probably excuse was, well, they didn't have the manpower to do that. Now you're talking, roughly 100 cars that are in close proximity that fit the description of the car that they're allegedly looking for. Right?
Oh, for sure.
Right. So, but that leaves out the other however many thousand that were registered in the state of Washington and the state of Idaho. Right. So they're not talking about any of those. Now, if they're going with we don't have the manpower to do that, why would they put a tip line out that would absorb more manpower? When you see, this is my point. So why complicate the case? And here's my other question. So once they decided that Kohberger was the man, right?
Right.
Did they stop investigating the other prior people of interest? Did they just stop questioning them? Because they're like, okay, so we got Kohberger dead nuts here. So why waste our time? Because our time is so valuable. Why would we waste our time interviewing or looking further into these people? And that's the thing that's very suspect, as we've said in the prior episodes, is how did Kohberger become the person of interest based on like minute, like coincidences?
No, no, you make some great points, Ron. I mean, there is no clear indicator what went on there as far as whittling down any sort of other leads or anything else. And you're right. Why would they flood their tip line with these clearly erroneous tips? If it was designed to be an objectively genuine, approach to obtain information from the general public, which by all appearances, it has the only appearance that it was done only to put on this charade of an actual investigation, right?
Yeah.
And then the FBI analyst who allegedly identified the 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra on unknown video footage. So the video footage shown to the public of this vehicle, especially from the gas station on the state highway leaving town, right, at 3:45 in the morning, that is not the footage that was used to allegedly identify Kohberger. Now, the footage used allegedly to identify Kohberger there's no clear indicator of that either, right? In fact, the video evidence that has been the total video evidence has been supplied to Kohberger's counsel, according to Kohberger's counsel's arguments, has shown the wrong vehicle at the wrong time in the wrong place, and the vehicle shown is clearly not their client's, the suspect Kohberger's vehicle. So there seems to be more games being played with this video footage. So no one really knows what video footage was used, but the analyst said he went back and watched the video footage that he used the first time to identify the 2011 to 2013. And upon his reanalysis, the FBI agent decided that it was a 2011 to 2016 white Hyundai Elantra, but does not specify and what characteristics or details that caused him to change his analysis and judgment of the vehicle. Again, more trickery being played with these factors and details. I like to say that the evidence on its surface appears strong. It's all circumstantial, but it appears somewhat strong circumstantial evidence, but it's wafer thin. Upon any scrutiny, any aspect of this case fails almost immediately. And again, this video evidence is a clear indicator.
And the thing is, too, in my opinion, the video evidence, at least, what they're seeing and what we're seeing could be two different things. But it's not 100% clear to me that it's a Hyundai Elantra at all.
I don't know that, until any video is produced, or even to the suspect's defense counsel, so that they can verify what this is. Because again, according to them, the only video that's been produced to them is not their client's vehicle. It's not at the right place for these crimes to have occurred at the wrong time. It's at the wrong time, wrong place, and etc. For it to even be involved in this murder.
Yeah, the thing that interests me is why they're so hell bent on pinning it on Kohberger, because it's almost like, okay, so we know this is what he drives for a car, so let's make this fit into the evidence. It basically could be as simple as that.
No, because, I agree with you, and they're doing that right now, right, with his alibi, right? You kind of called it out in our last discussion.
Yeah.
That one of the positive advantages for Kohberger not providing his alibi is so they can't bend any more evidence around whatever information he provides.
Well, here's the thing, like, it's still playing games with discovery, right? I mean, we're still not seeing what they have for discovery, right? So they're holding a lot of that back. So is the fact that they might not even have the proper car, because this car, this and this one little piece of contact DNA is basically all they have to go on, is the fact that maybe they don't have the car correct, or that it's going to appear that they made this car fit into the evidence, causing the delay for the discovery.
I like the kind of where we're going with our previous discussion and our last discussion, Ron, and that was this silver in colored sedan that looks striking. It's a Ford, I believe Fusion, maybe. It looks strikingly similar to the white Hyundai Elantra, especially at nighttime. Is the vehicle that any camera picked up in the area. I question whether or not there was any vehicle whatsoever at all that even resembled a white Hyundai Elantra, other than this undercover Moscow PD vehicle that was doing the drunk check there on the road just in front of King Street, the adjacent roadway, or the parallel roadway there, near the Banfield, the infamous Banfield drunk student video. That's the same cops that were operating this silver in color unmarked sedan. Now, if you look on any of the Moscow PD records in the city of Moscow, they don't have any unmarked vehicles. If you listen to the officers' statements to the drunk college students in their body cam footage, they're saying that that's a department vehicle, and that they were traded in to get electrical vehicles, hybrid vehicles for the police, but they didn't. There's no record of that.
I saw somebody actually go through the whole process of like showing you the amount spent, like that the department even claimed on spending.
Oh yeah,
and what they spent it on.
Budget and financial records are always available like that.
And it does not show that they have that car. It does not exist technically. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and anyone in the public can go look on the city's website and look at the budget. They're on the budget documents there, and it's accessible to the public, and you can see that they don't have any unmarked vehicles. So then it begs the question: is that the vehicle seen on any camera footage? And then it also begs the question of who were the assailants and what were they driving? Because again, I don't think it's one, but so what do they operate in? I mean, I have some suggestions on how I would approach that home and remain virtually undetected, and that is parking on the road on the hillside north of the home, up the hill from the backside of the home. And there's a trail that actually runs through the woods there from that street up there. And you could park a car up on the street up there, walk to that trail, be in the backyard, accessing either one of the sliding doors, because the upper level sliding doors clearly accessible. You have to go through a little bit more effort than walking through the main sliding door on the second level of the home from the backyard. However, that would be the most optimal egress point to the home to remain unseen. So then you're not likely going to see any of the assailant's vehicle on any camera in the area. See what I'm saying? And they provably didn't even ask people immediately around the house questions, and provably the law enforcement provably did not get very, very demonstrably did not get security camera footage from numerous parties, including the infamous gas station footage we discussed before, which shows a vehicle at 3:45 heading out of town that looks like a white Hyundai Elantra, but you can't tell for certain what it is.
Something interesting I want to add for when it comes to unmarked cars, just from my experience in my state, and I know other states like Florida does this also. They will take a vehicle that's an off-the-street vehicle that may have been either impounded or forfeited or something like that, and register it with regular license plates.
Right.
And this is what they use for unmarked cars, and there's no record of these cars with the PDs. Now, I don't know how they would be able to do that. I mean, there has to be some form of paper trail as to who this car belongs to and who it's registered to. But I do know the state of New Hampshire. Now, I don't know what they do now, but I can tell you what they used to do. They had a whole bunch of cars, and one of them was one of those Dodge Stealths, or it was the Mitsubishi 3000 GT.
Okay.
That
So these are
use.
drug seizures that they're taking control of.
And it had regular license plates on it. Did not have any governmental license plate or a very distinctive New Hampshire State Police license plate on it. That's, they're numbered. You can pick one of those out a mile away. But this is something that undercovers, like if they have a real undercover department and they need cars that are off the record, and say, you get some people like criminals, they're very good at vetting things like they want to see, okay, this person that's coming around, trying to do business with us, let's run his plate and see who belongs to that.
Sure.
While the unmarked people, they need to make sure that plate actually goes back to something, because if it goes back to nothing, it's going to be a red flag.
That's a good point, Ron. As usual, Detective Ron with an excellent assessment of the situation here. Now, I agree with you. And that's very common because they do drug seizures, right? And the departments will seize a vehicle and repurpose that as an undercover vehicle. And I think I actually think that's a very plausible scenario here in this circumstance. But then it begs the question is, why are these officers sitting there not in uniform, not in a in a police patrol car? So by all appearances, undercover. I mean, they have kind of their duty belts on and a radio and stuff, but they're not wearing a uniform. They're not in a marked car, right? Because the kids even said to them, "I didn't know who you guys were at first. I thought you were messing with us," like somebody claiming to be the police. Right?
Yeah, I saw that. And here's the other thing too. If they're going to go through the trouble to have an unmarked car that's not traceable, what is their reasoning for having that other than a lot of drug trafficking or maybe human trafficking going on in this area, which can lead us back to this funky email that NY got from somebody, which is very interesting, which states that there's a possibility, or more than a possibility, that this house was actually under surveillance prior to these kids living there for drug and human trafficking activity. What is your input on that?
Yeah, I'm curious. That wouldn't surprise me a bit. That's kind of my assessment already. So I'd love to hear some more details.
Yeah, I mean, not to get conspiratorial or anything, but tell you the truth, if that was the situation, I could see now that whole tunnel system that I think True Crime Design and Drip Drop have both showed by now, that there is an existing tunnel system that runs from the heating area or the heating plant throughout that area, and there is one down on the map that is supposedly in that property or very close to it, and there's other areas I think where there's manhole covers or something like that. And so if there was that stuff going on, I could see utilization of those tunnels, as silly as it sounds.
Okay, so it may sound silly to a lot of people. However, I can tell you from experience, in the city of Concord, which is the capital of New Hampshire, has massive tunnel systems that go all over the city, because Concord is old school, and they had a steam plant that used to supply all the heat to all the state buildings, including the State House.
Well, isn't that
the State
House too? I think I think that's exactly what the tunnel system is for. The same thing.
It's for that, and it's also to because the tunnel system in the city of Concord is actually tied to what they call New Hampshire Hospital, which is AKA the Nut House. And I know because I've been in those tunnels, and those tunnels connect all the buildings from all them complexes. Now, where the New Hampshire Hospital is located is about 6 blocks from where the State House is, because the State House is right on Main Street. But you have all these adjacent buildings that are like, they have the State House, they have this what they call the State House Annex. There's tunnels that go to all of these buildings, and a lot of them are for utilities, but like you say, mostly for the steam heat. So if there's tunnels being reported close to this area and close to these universities. Well, that would make sense, because it would make sense that these tunnels actually do exist, because a lot of these big, huge complexes, they don't have their own personal heating systems, right? They have a major heating system that's located who knows where, and they have tunnel systems that all this stuff runs through. And of course, these tunnel systems make for great escape routes, or as JJ would say, ingress routes.
Right.
I mean, you're looking above the ground for assailants. You're looking above ground. You're not thinking about, are they traveling underground? And if there's a manhole that's in close proximity to 1122 King Street or King Road, that is absolutely a possibility.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Assailant or assailants, because I don't think whoever did this acted alone. And this is another reason why, if Kohberger did do it, he didn't act alone. But I don't really think he did it. Just my personal opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point, Ron, because there's a complete absence of evidence of anyone leaving that scene, right? And let's say even the roommates, I question whether or not even the roommates were present in that home, even when the 911 call was made, or even the night before, quite honestly. But specifically when the 911 call was made, because let's say they call 6 people, right? Which is roughly the story. Those 6 people come into the house. They're all walking in this bloody home where this murder occurred, right? Again, this whole unconscious person doesn't make any sense. It is what you would say if you're not in the home and you want the police to go there. You wouldn't want to admit to knowing there's blood everywhere and stuff like that. That I would agree with. And the 911 call was made for an unconscious person, right? So, and allegedly the 2 roommates called all these people over. Well, they'd be tracking stuff out of there too, but no, there's no blood tracks anywhere, right? So one, I think that's a good point of it could be subterranean on their egress point from the murder scene. And 2, it really draws the question, were the roommates even home? Did all these people come over there, right? Because as the story goes, the roommates made the 911 call. A friend made a 911 call from the surviving roommate's cell phone. Doesn't say which one of the 2. They leave that up as being ambiguous, because no one will release the 911 call, which seems odd to me as well, because why would you not release the 911 call? What's the 911 call going to, like, this isn't the, school shooting where the 911 calls were held back. You know what I mean? This is not anything graphic on the 911 call, right? This is someone reporting an unconscious person, supposedly, according to the written record of the report. So a lot of questions there, but I think that's a great point to bring up, that they may have departed the scene underground as opposed to above ground. Because again, there's no evidence of any blood or anything outside the home. I mean, it's very, very mysterious in that regard.
And one of the reasons I even entertain that theory was because, like, I did actually, you can see videos, and like, again, like, even with the way Ron was saying, like, it's steam, so like they have room in case this stuff breaks. This isn't like these little tunnels that people are squeezing by pipes.
Right.
These crimes. These are actually, like, there's room.
Yeah, walkways, underground walkways.
Yeah, I mean, certain areas there.
The tunnels that they have in the city of Concord, you could drive a golf cart in easily.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's not like, if people don't want to get a visual of what we're even talking about.
Yeah. I do have a comment about the 911 call, though. Sorry to interrupt you, NY.
No.
But the 911 calls, or any 911 calls that are associated with this case, would be part of discovery. And this is something that should be in discovery, because, there's like a lot of questions just based on the 911 calls, right? I mean, that's something that nobody's even talking about, other than JJ, what you just said.
Right.
Now all these have to be in discovery, yet we're still waiting for discovery. And this is absolutely ridiculous that it's taken this long for discovery to come out, number one. And I still said, like I said in previous episodes, the discovery is not being released. Of course, they're holding it hostage against Kohberger, because Kohberger was refusing to give up his alibi, right? Like initially. Right. So, but now, what's the excuse now? Why are we holding it up? Because are you waiting because you need to find more more evidence to fit your narrative to put into your discovery to even present to somebody? Because we know that getting convicted in a court of law is going to be a lot different than getting a grand jury to go ahead and say, yeah, you have enough to arrest him and indict him.
No,
So,
absolutely.
So
You're spot
all
on,
that
Ron.
is going to be in discovery, and then it can be picked apart. You know, the really thing that bothers me about this, that Kohberger didn't have somebody come forward like a big time lawyer that really knows what they're talking about and say, look it, you know, I'm out here, I'm just kind of interested in this case. I really feel as though there's some like high strangeness shenanigans going on here. I'm going to take this case pro bono just because that's how strongly I feel that there could be a potential miscarriage of justice here. We're not seeing any of that because Brian Kohberger basically has a public defender.
You know, you bring up a good point. I think that, there is some stuff to be said about there is no attorney really standing up for him. I mean, in fact, you have characters like Mark Garagos, who are kind of a famous criminal defense attorney, Michael Jackson, Scott Peterson, the Lacey Peterson murder. He's out there doing interviews basically incriminating Brian Kohberger along with the rest of these media pundits, so it is kind of interesting that there is a lack of that, just like there's a lack of reward that was ever placed out by authorities in the search of who done it, and maybe way before they allegedly got to Kohberger. Usually you would see a reward and stuff like that. So there's a lot of anomalies in that department for sure. But as far as this public defender goes, even how he got the public defender is kind of mysterious, right? Because much like any state, you have to go to a hearing. You have to basically file a motion. It's a standard form, but it's a motion you file with the court saying I'm indigent, I cannot afford counsel, and I need a public defender assigned to me based upon the state's expense. And that doesn't seem to have ever occurred here. Kohberger may have been able to fill out the form when he got arrested in Pennsylvania. However, when he landed in Idaho, he'd already had Ann Taylor on the case, which has always kind of been bizarre to me because he could have filled out the form, but you have to have the hearing still, right? And there's no advanced like, hey, we decided you qualify, right? Like they have to have a hearing on the sign the public expense for an attorney to you. So I don't know how that went down. It seems very mysterious. However, from moment one, though, Ann Taylor has been ardently defending her client. So while she is a public defender, I think she's done a great job. I like what she's doing with the alibi too. A lot of people diminish her because of the alibis and diminish Kohberger, but look, they admitted to precisely what the state's arguing right now, right? They said Brian Kohberger likes to drive around by himself in the early morning hours because that's all the state has asserted so far. They've produced no other evidence, discovery, anything else. They've produced phone records saying that his phone had pinged in these things and that his phone was either turned off, put on airplane mode, or, as they don't like to tell you, simply did not receive any calls, texts, or activity for the time period in which they claim his phone was turned off, right? That's the little asterisk they don't like to tell you. They say turned off or in airplane mode, right? So they have very limited evidence. What the alibi has done is they've admitted to what the evidence supports. They're saying, look, show us this discovery, the DNA evidence, the video of the car. Now they're saying, show us precisely how you got to Kohberger, right? Because they're not going to do any other actions on their end from the defense until the state takes other actions. Again, it's part of that lawfare stuff. So I know a lot of people are suspect about the alibi. I think I think she's doing a great job. And I forget the fellow. She's got a co-counsel, some guy. But I think they're doing a great job at defending Kohberger so far. And one of the first things they did was stop the destruction of the home. Granted, the home's back to being possibly getting destroyed again, but it would have been destroyed already had it not been for his defense counsel.
Yeah, I did want to add that, JJ, that I think Ann Taylor's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, sure. No,
I wasn't want to
imply that you didn't think that, or anything. I was just saying, she's doing. They're doing.
I didn't want to say. I didn't want to say anything disparaging or whatever because she's doing a good job for sure. Yeah. My point is, in some up and coming defense attorney that's probably evolved from being a prosecutor to being an ambulance chaser, this case would be the perfect opportunity to put yourself in the limelight, even if you were doing it pro bono, like pay me later, because the amount of money that I'm going to make on other cases when I prove that Brian Kohberger is actually innocent or there's not enough evidence to convict him, which is not the same as being innocent. Okay.
No, for sure.
I just, for the life of me, knowing lawyers like I do, I can't believe that somebody hasn't stepped up. Like you say, Mark Garagos, perfect example. Even F. Lee Bailey back in the day. Now that's before you guys' time. I don't know if you're familiar with F. Lee Bailey.
No, I recall F. Lee Bailey, Boston Strangler, O.J. Simpson's Dream Team.
Yeah. So, even Kardashian. I mean, this is where all the Kardashians got their money, was from their dad. He was one of OJ's lawyers, right? He wasn't that well known before that. I mean, he was, but not to that extent. So that to me is just kind of interesting. Now, the thing about the phone, just devil advocate here. If they're saying that one of the things that Kohberger liked to do was in the early morning hours drive around in his car or whatever, I can tell you from personal experience, like when I need to relax and I need brain time and I don't want to be disturbed, I go for a drive.
Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable.
It used to be go for motorcycle rides back in the day, but go for a drive, and the first thing I do is I put my phone on airplane mode. So I don't get calls. I don't get texts. I just don't want to talk to anybody.
Sure.
My iTunes works, and that's all I need in my podcast app. I don't want people getting a hold of me. Now, it could be just as simple as that with Kohberger, So, I mean, something to think about. I don't think that's a big deal that he's driving around with his phone on.
No, I don't think it is either. But in the way I look at it, in the context I kind of look at it in, is the state saying to Kohberger and his defense counsel, look, we got your client driving around per these cell phone pings at these hours of the morning, right? And whether or not he was driving, I mean, I agree with you about, I like to drive too. So I agree with you, Ron, about, wanting to go drive and turn in airplane mode so you don't get interrupted, right? I'm into the same relaxation principles as you got there, Ron. But what I'm saying is whether or not he was doing that or not is irrelevant, though, really, if you look at it, right? What his attorney is saying.
Well, that's my point. It is irrelevant. Whether his phone's on airplane mode is freaking totally irrelevant to.
No, that's irrelevant too. But what I'm saying is it's irrelevant whether or not he was driving or not, right? What his defense counsel basically said is, so what? You got my client driving around in the early morning hours with his phone off. So what? That's their response, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great response, because they're not providing any more information to the prosecution to twist or bend or shape in whatever narrative they want to against Kohberger. She's answering what they presented thus far. Again, they presented nothing. They're holding back all this discovery. So she's countering what she's been forced to counter so far, and that's very limited information, which includes cell phone tower pings, basically.
Yeah, you know what really bothers me about this? If they're going to be playing this lawfare and holding back discovery, they're just postponing. They're just postponing the trial. They're postponing anything for the defense, and that to me is a violation of Kohberger's rights to speedy trial.
Oh, absolutely.
And what they should do, honestly, right? Just let the guy bail him out.
Right.
Do even if it's $1 million, I'm sure they can come up with the 10% of that. It's $100,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
His
parents can put their house up. To get the kid out. If he was my kid, I would do that in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even think twice about it.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes you wonder why, they're going to keep prolonging this, are they going to keep him in jail pre-trial for 18 months? Because again, this is going to be a long time. This is not getting resolved. I mean, just comparatively speaking, look at the Chad Daybell case out of Idaho, right? That thing is what, 2+ years in the making, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be on par with that, if not longer.
Yeah, I understand that their motive is that it's a capital murder case, but I mean, even still,
right? But at what point in time are we going to accept, as just the general public, or people generally speaking, that people get charged for capital murder cases without any evidence produced in which to substantiate the claim that this person is even involved, let alone the actual perpetrator of the murder? Because that's really, if you boil it down, that's what's going on here with Kohberger right now. They want to keep the man in jail while providing no evidence to substantiate these charges, which they've indicted him for, right? The public arraignment hearing that should have occurred, that at bare minimum, you would expect the 911 call to be released at the public arraignment hearing, right? Let alone some of these witnesses that were apparently testifying to incriminate him would have also had to testify at the public arraignment hearing. So the moment they threw on that grand jury, I find it the chronological order of events very, very suspect, because Kohberger's counsel gets a subpoena for Bethany Funk, the surviving roommate / not an eyewitness according to the state, but according to Kohberger's counsel is an eyewitness and can provide exculpatory evidence, is what they're insinuating with the subpoena of Bethany Funk. So that occurs days later, 2 or 3 days later, I believe it was. The state then says, "Oh, surprise! We did a grand jury indictment." So that public arraignment hearing here in about 10 days, that's canceled, and Kohberger is now indicted for these 4 homicides. So
Yeah,
I think
you know,
there's a causal chain of events, is what I'm getting at there, right? So Kohberger's counsel is getting closer to what's going on here. They get the court to actually issue a subpoena for Bethany Funk, and then like that, Kohberger's indicted. Everything's under a layer of confidentiality, and the public arraignment hearing is gone, and this fight for discovery is continuing for months later.
you know, there was an interesting paragraph in the email that NY had received. I just kind of wanted to go over that real quick.
No, I'd love to hear more about this. Whatever
Yeah.
you'd like to share. I'm actually really curious about some of these conclusions and the parties.
Well, it's just interesting here because the person that had emailed NY, I mean, it's a very interesting, like a lot of interesting information in here, right? But it says, do you remember Ann Taylor, which is Kohberger's attorney, said a few months ago that Brian Kohberger was chosen for this job long before he came to town. So this job that he had at the university, he must have, applied or whatever, was accepted to do that or whatever. Like, and then he actually had to move there to take this position, right? And it says, we've been told he was an informant working for a task force. And in parentheses it says, which is corrupt, working to bust a drug trafficking ring run by outsiders at the house, which suggests that if this house was used as a drug house, that these people and possibly the kids that were staying there, if they were trafficking in drugs, which we're not accusing them of doing, it's just this is a story and some rumors that are going around, were deemed outsiders. So they would have made themselves a target for the people that were actually, basically comes down to a turf war. Like, oh no, we're in charge of dealing the drugs around here. So these people coming into this house and setting up a drug trafficking operation deemed as outsiders may have made them a target, right, for this. And what's interesting here is that the outsiders include Brent K. We've talked about him before.
Yep.
Demetrius R., Emma B., Quinn K., and even little DM herself. Some people said he was working for the FBI. Now, I'm assuming in this email they're referring to Kohberger, that Kohberger may have been working for the FBI.
It sounds like it.
Right, yeah. An informant for the military said BK was actually working for Don Esty.
Well, let's just pause right there for a second. Look over the. No, I was saying those names you just read off. I think it's kind of important to go over who those people are, just for context. So Emma and Demetrius were the folks that they had charges dropped, but they were initially charged with the drug overdose death of that fraternity president back in March.
Yep. Yeah.
And then Quinn is DM's boyfriend, is Dylan Morrison's boyfriend. He's out of Boise. He looks, from my assessment of the man's activities and social media profiles, he looks like a hood. So him being involved in drug activity would not be a shocker to me.
Well, what was interesting here said that BK, Brian Kohberger, was actually working for Dan Esty, who was an informant for DHS, but also allegedly involved in all of this trafficking. So Dan Esty was somebody that we spoke about pre-show.
Yeah, on him, man.
Yeah, that maybe we can get into in a little bit here. But I just thought that was interesting because they have all these other people brought into the fray as outsiders that were involved in drug trafficking. Right now, as you had said before, the 2 of these people were initially charged with the overdose death of this other gentleman, right?
Correct.
Like prior to this. But
March of 2023, which it occurred at another interesting kind of focal point in this case.
With the pill stamping operation that we talked about.
March was just when the state's case started to fall apart, when this discovery battle began, and that happened really at the same week. That's when they initially tried to subpoena Bethany Funk, and the discovery battle and this overdose death all occurred within like 3 days of each other at the end of March.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting because they're saying that Demetrius and Emma were very vocal, like giving a lot of information. And this is another reason why the charges were dropped against them. So I mean, to me, that would imply
It's certainly plausible.
Became, some form of informants also.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly plausible, Ron. That's some good points for sure. Now, I mean, I've seen some of these claims, and again, I think that there are some plausible scenarios being presented there. I don't know if they're valid or not, because again, I don't know. It really is a question mark how Brent Kopacka, because he does seem to, just given the the other elements of the situation we've already discussed, he does seem to fit into this whole equation somehow. And again, at the end of the day, why is a 36-year-old man living on Washington State University campus? Who gave him campus housing and why? Right?
One thing I just wanted to clarify, when they say BK was actually working for Dan Estey, I'm wondering if they're talking about Brent Kopacka and not Brian.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
And you never know. Kohberger could be some sort of informant. You never really know. There is. I mean, one thing we can tell right now, the three of us or any folks of the interwebs listening, there is a large scale amount of federal activity that's been going on in that area for some time, preceding the deaths and in the associated with the investigation after the deaths. The FBI is way too involved in this case. They're the ones pulling the strings at every kind of important aspect of this case, from the identity of the white vehicle Hyundai Elantra via the video surveillance, the alleged video surveillance. They're the ones who allegedly found the DNA on the knife sheath, the alleged knife sheath. The FBI is also the ones who apparently built this family tree that the state of Idaho is now saying, this is their argument. They're saying that we don't have to provide any of that DNA evidence in discovery because the FBI is the one who did it. And we're not the FBI, so we don't have access to that information. That's not how discovery or investigations work. So that it's a weird argument they continue to make, but they continue to make that argument.
Right. And the other thing is, too, if you want to bring in the FBI into it and other types of task force, that they had stated that there was a parallel crimes investigation, meaning multiple agencies investigating multiple crimes. Right. Nobody mentioned anything about that before. Nobody said anything about the FBI being involved in this, DHS being involved in this, anything like that. Just local PD, right, or state police was involved in this investigation. Now, why are they saying or implying that there was a parallel crimes investigation even prior to the murders based on what was going on at this particular location?
I see what you're saying, and yeah, most of the FBI agents, the Moscow PD reported as being involved in their investigation, were actually in a call center in West Virginia, right? Because it was part of that tip line. But I see what you're saying about these parallel investigations. It really makes you wonder, and I'll throw another factor in there in that equation to consider. On or about December 15th, 5 or 6, I believe, 6 or 7 federal law enforcement officers came to the 1122 King Street home late one evening, and it was caught by, I believe, News Nation as these folks were entering and exiting the property. They were in there for, I believe, about 20 to 30 minutes, walking around the house, turning different lights on, going different rooms, right? You could see that from the outside of the home. But was often described as these men being FBI agents. These were not FBI agents. I've worked with FBI in the past. I've worked with I've worked with U.S. Marshals in the past. And these were definitely U.S. Marshals, these federal agents that came in there. So because FBI, they all wear suits. They all look very boring and they dress very bland. The U.S. Marshals are a bunch of cowboys. In fact, one of these guys was wearing a cowboy hat that came into the home. They're all none of them are dressed uniformly. The FBI is always dressed uniformly. These guys were all dressed differently, right? So these were clearly U.S. Marshals, from my assessment.
And what's interesting, hold on, JJ. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing to say too is that U.S. Marshals have a different job. Right.
Yep,
U.S. Marshals. Yeah. U.S. Marshals are kind of the guys that say you turn informant, state's evidence, government evidence, informant or whatever. Right. Even if you're confidential and you decide you're going to skip, like, okay, I'm out of here. Like the U.S. Marshals are the guys they send to go find you.
Oh, big time. They're also the ones who run WITSEC. Like, as you said, so the general program of being a witness or something like that, in sort of witness security programs, that's their responsibility. They're the ones who do that stuff.
Right. But wouldn't that imply that there was people involved that were informants working for the government?
informants or possibly their family members were informants, which I think we were going to discuss relative to some of these parents that are involved in
Oh,
drug
yeah.
activities as well.
Oh yeah.
So if your parent is involved in some sort of informant business and you have a college student, then they may be involved in that same sort of process, right? I mean, not necessarily, it's not automatic or mandatory, but it's very likely, especially if it's a daughter, right? For as far as security purposes go. And I think these guys coming into the scene kind of, a month after the murder. So I think that's an intriguing aspect as well, because maybe they were trying to do some things behind the scene, but then they finally had to get involved and they weren't really wanting to. It also speaks to these parallel investigations, because the U.S. Marshals report to the U.S. Marshal for that district. So each district of each state's like two different districts, and the U.S. Marshals. They have a U.S. Marshal in charge of one district and the other district for the state, and they directly work with the U.S. Attorney for the state. So they have a different hierarchy in communications and orders being issued level, as opposed to some of the other federal agencies go. Again, they very much operate like cowboys. They could very well be involved in investigating other federal agencies.
Yeah, the thing is, if you're out on bail too and you decide you're going to skip, that's who they send after you, the U.S. Marshals.
Yeah, so they have a wide scope, a very wide scope of activities. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just interesting if there was, information that saying that U.S. Marshals were actually at this location on or around December 15th, which is approximately a month after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll provide Nick a link to the video I'm referring to from the news reporter who tries to stop these men coming out of the house and ask them questions. And, they're covering up their faces. They're running around to the vehicle. I mean, again, these are not FBI agents. These are absolutely, in my opinion, U.S. Marshals. Again, I have most of my experience working with other federal law enforcement agencies from the Air Force was with the U.S. Marshals. So I have a good amount of time spotting these guys, and them or the Secret Service, but these guys are definitely fall within the appearances of looking like the U.S. Marshals. And again, there could be a litany of different activities that could be involved with this case, but seemingly folks jumping bail or witness security folks, those are the two primary aspects. And again, drug informants, all of these things could be factors playing in here in this case.
Yeah, neither Secret Service or FBI agents dressed like they're Texas Rangers.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Very stiff crowd. One time I stumbled into an FBI convention in Bismarck, North Dakota at a Holiday Inn. I got snowed in there traveling across the U.S. and Holiday Inn, it's right there off the highway. It's the biggest hotel in town. It's Bismarck, North Dakota, And so I go in there thinking, I'll just get a room here. I booked it online, and then I walk in the place. There's literally an FBI convention. It's not 8:00 at night. 300 FBI agents still in their suits, relaxing and celebrating, at the convention, drink hour or whatnot. It's just a very stiff crowd. They're never really, they're always uniform in their activity and their dress and stuff.
Yeah. Not very warm and welcoming.
Going back to the FBI, I think that's something that's happened since the last time we spoke, or I could be wrong. Maybe it's just something I've come across since then. When they did have someone in court, and JJ, if you know what I'm talking about, you'll probably know her exact job. I can't remember who she was, but there was somebody that they spoke to in court about the DNA. And
the expert witness.
How they actually kind of she, in my opinion, was basically telling you that there's kind of like a glitch in the site that allows you to see things that you're actually not supposed to. And right after that, the FBI showed up at her house.
Right. Shocker. That story gets even creepier just beyond the mere instance of the FBI visiting your house. But that's a good point.
The lawyer's pulling that up too, is bringing that up. They're like, we have this person here on the stand, and then the FBI goes into their house the next day. Like, that's not like witness harassment.
Exactly. Yeah. And the prosecution's argument was ridiculous. The prosecution said, and this is where I think they're dancing around some words and verbiage. The Latah County prosecutor argued, well, we were told that she sent email communications to third parties recanting her testimony. What are you talking about? So you mean to imply that within 24 hours of her testimony that she sent an email and a gag ordered case to one of her other professionals within her community? That professional disliked what she said in this whole, recanting her sworn testimony later via email. And then that third party then sends the email to the FBI or to the Latah County Sheriff or prosecutor's office, and then Latah County prosecutor's office calls the FBI, and the FBI goes over there. This all occurred within 24 hours. I don't think so. What I do think occurred there is the FBI is monitoring that lady's communications. And whether or not she wrote any email or not is not been proven by anybody. But what I do know is they seem to be monitoring her communications, it seems. And maybe even she just said she didn't like something about the prosecution that day in the court, right? Maybe she sent an email to one of her colleagues saying, these guys are clueless, right? And then the FBI was like, oh, we'll just make up a story that she's recanted her testimony, and then that'll, we'll go intimidate her so that she does recant her testimony, right?
Yeah, there was even other stuff that happened in court recently that I wanted to touch on that I think has happened between the last episode. One, it might have actually have been known, but I didn't know, and I'll bring this one up first because I think it's a little bit more less time consuming to talk about. I know like some people don't really think the DNA, when we've had negative comments, which was very few on the episode, a lot of the people seem to be picking at us bringing up the DNA. And I'm still going to bring it up again. So
I mean, it's an ongoing saga. So,
but I was watching something. I have a cracked Fire Stick, so I talked in something to try to find stuff in the Idaho 4, and I don't know what this was from. It pulled up something, and I played it. Now I'm guessing every time it showed the news covering the Idaho 4, it was always CNN. So I'm guessing maybe this was actually a show on CNN. I don't know. It's a cracked Fire Stick. So I'm watching it, and they mentioned, now I don't know, again, this is CNN, so who knows? So this is where you have to question the news itself, but they're like speaking as if they already know certain things. Now I don't know if it's known, but they were saying the DNA matched Brian Kohberger's father 99 point something %.
That's what the claims are.
Why the hell are you even looking at him?
No,
that's much of the father.
Well, no, what you're saying and what they've been reporting is, the genetic genealogy testing indicated that the suspect's DNA on the button of the alleged suspect's DNA of the alleged knife sheath on the alleged button was the 99.9% chance of being the son of the DNA sample that was retrieved from Kohberger's parents' trash can, notably on private property without a search warrant. And again, as we've already established in this conversation today, for no purpose whatsoever did they have any reason to even focus on Kohberger at that point in time.
Yeah, and they seem to make it sound like it's that glitch in that database that they're using that might have actually made that happen too. I don't know.
Well, what I think is, and why Kohberger's counsel is focusing on those technical aspects is because it goes back to, again, they're counteracting whatever the states produce, and the states produce nothing, right? The states produce statements, and they're poking holes in those statements right now with these expert witnesses saying even the way the state's explaining this is bunk, right?
Yeah, and that goes even into the second thing that has to do with DNA. They're asking where's the other I guess I don't know what you would call them. The other thing, samples of DNA.
Right, where's the tree?
Yeah, where's the other? No, but where's the other ones? The other male DNA you said collected at the site.
Yeah, the three male DNA. Yeah. Why was that never tested? Yeah.
Yeah. No, what's up with that? Where's your stuff on that?
Yeah, I call that elimination DNA because that eliminates other people as suspects, right? So I think that I don't think that the DNA is admissible. I really don't. I just
it's hard to believe it would be.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, another reason why they're probably holding back with discovery, because if all they have is this contact DNA, if that's all they have, and then they look at how they retrieved this DNA without a warrant out of a trash can,
exactly,
that was on private property.
Exactly.
This, to me, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that would be inadmissible because this is evidence that was not retrieved legally. And I mean, they have to be held accountable for some things when they're gathering evidence.
No, that's a great point.
And this is in the discovery, has to be.
Yeah.
So any court would say, yeah, well, we can, you can manipulate DNA. Yeah, I got it from this person and that, and it fits in this database. Oh, genetically, it could be Kohberger's because, we got the match with his dad's DNA. Okay, how did you get to DNA? Did you have a warrant to get to DNA? Well, no, we just went and took it.
Yep. No,
what do you think is going to happen? I'm starting to kind of question whether the judge is actually on the ball on this deal.
What do you mean?
Well,
if he's on the take, right? You know what
I
mean?
Well, what I'm saying is this judge is this judge doing their job? I mean, because they should go to the prosecution and say, okay, listen, stop messing around. Let's do the discovery. And there should be some questions based on the acquiring of this DNA and whether or not this was lawful or not.
No, and you're spot on, Ron. And that's where the prosecution. I think you're 100% correct in your assessment too, because that's what the prosecution's at right now. They're saying we're not going to use any of that evidence. So if they say they're not going to use any of that evidence to prosecute Kohberger, which has been their argument since March, and they continue to repeat throughout all these different motions for discovery, they're saying, well, we're not going to use that, so they can't have it. Right. And that is true. If they're not going to use the evidence in the prosecution of Kohberger, then they're not the state's not required to divulge that in discovery. And their argument also now is we swabbed Kohberger's the inside of his mouth, did a cheek swab, and he matches the DNA from the knife sheath. Right. That's their new story. Right. But again, it goes back to how you can't the defense can't vet any of that unless they can get any of the evidence of the DNA research and testing that's already been done to get to that point. And the state's saying, no, we're not going to use that. We have this new DNA, right? See what I'm saying? See the parlor trick being involved here, right?
Okay, so what you're saying is now they're saying they're not going to use the DNA that they found in the trash can.
Exactly.
So they don't have to give any of that
Kohberger.
information. They don't have to give any of that information in discovery. But it was that DNA that they used as evidence to arrest Kohberger, not the DNA evidence on okay, let's go back to the alleged knife sheath.
No, that's Kohberger's defense's argument right there, what you just said.
Okay.
You had to use the other DNA evidence to get to the second DNA evidence.
But now you say you're not going to use it.
Right.
Okay, well, that still goes back to if you get stopped for a freaking taillight out and they end up giving you a DWI test and they charge you with DWI, but you never got a ticket for the taillight.
Sure.
My buddy got off of a DWI that way.
Yeah, no probable cause.
Because, okay, so your probable cause to stop this vehicle was the taillight was out.
Yep.
Then we find out that you're a possible drunk driver. We test you do the breathalyzer, whatever, you're drunk. So we're going to charge you with DWI. Oh, but we didn't give you a ticket for the taillight or even what we call a DE tag, defective equipment tag.
Sure.
We didn't do any of that. And so the judge was like, okay, so you stopped them. You didn't have probable cause to stop them because they were swerving or driving erratic. You just had probable cause to stop them because it was for a traffic stop because they had taillight out.
Right.
But then you end up charging them with DWI. Yeah, case is out of here.
Yeah.
He actually walked on that. It's the same freaking scenario here because if they went and they took the DNA from his dad's trash can, it wasn't actual Brian Kohberger himself's DNA, but it was his dad's DNA. Right. And yes, they can use those to link the two. This is
in theory they can.
In theory. So they can use this to say, okay, well, this is his DNA or whatever, but they still would have to have the knife sheath to even make that connection.
Right.
Because if the knife sheath doesn't exist, or if they have a knife sheath and it has a little bit of contact DNA on it, initially they didn't use Brian Kohberger's DNA to tie him into this. They used his dad's DNA to tie him into it. And now they're not going to use that because after they got DNA from Kohberger, assuming when he was in custody, right? Now they say, oh yeah, well, no, now this matches the knife sheath. So we don't have to use his dad's DNA when initially they used his dad's DNA to get the arrest warrant.
Right. When it's part of the same chain of custody of evidence in the process of the investigation, they're just trying to cut it out and say, nah, we don't need that anymore. We got this over here. It's a parlor trick. And it's a gross violation of Kohberger's rights.
Yeah. And like NY was saying, we were getting beat up in the chat or something before in the comments in the other episodes when we kept bringing up the DNA. Like the DNA is the only frigging evidence they have.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's the only piece of evidence that even implies a nexus point where of the suspect, the victim, and the crime scene, which are all imperative, and especially in a capital murder case.
And this is why we're making a big deal about the DNA. So the people making these comments need to understand that without DNA connection to these crimes or alleged knife sheath that the alleged murder weapon was allegedly in, they didn't freaking find and say anything about them finding till after the fact. And when they said that the knife sheath was found underneath a quilt on one of the beds, right? So this is why the DNA evidence is the number one hugest piece of evidence in this whole deal. Because if they don't have that, they got nothing on Brian Kohberger. Because there's nothing else to pin him to be at that location.
Yep. No, 100%, Ron. You're spot on target. And again, it's the same analysis applies as it did to the earlier investigations before, from November 29th to December 30th, the date Kohberger was allegedly identified as a person of interest, and the date he was the date he was arrested on December 30th. The way that law enforcement approached investigating him versus the other suspects, right? He wasn't questioned. There was no DNA requested from him, whereas other persons of interest were questioned during that time, right? And they did have DNA samples, right? So it goes to that same correlation, right? The same compare and contrast. Of those two scenarios. So you have Kohberger, like what caused law enforcement to go invade Kohberger's parents' trash can, right? There's no clear indicator of why they didn't stop him, right? Before he left town. They waited till he went out of town, right? And then they're going to go invade his trash can. But why would you do that? Like what caused you to focus on Kohberger to say that we got to go get DNA out of this trash can to see if it matches this guy we should have questioned 3 weeks ago? It makes no sense. And then if you look at that compared to the way that they approached the other DNA evidence at the scene, right? Compare and contrast that versus the way they allegedly addressed Kohberger's DNA or the alleged DNA at the scene. So they're going to focus on a tiny bit of touch DNA off of a button of a snap of the alleged knife sheath, but they're going to completely ignore 3 other male DNA samples from in and around the bodies in his home. Again, they don't specify where the DNA samples were found. The DNA evidence was found for these 3 unidentified males. They do say is it's around the victim's body. So what that implies is it's not on the first floor, right? Because the victim's bodies were on floor 2 and floor 3 of the home. So what that implies is they're finding this DNA evidence around the victim's bodies, and they don't test it. But they do hyper focused on the small amount of DNA on this button, and then they decide, well, since we're hyper focused on the small amount of touch DNA sample on this knife sheath, we're going to go invade this family's trash can in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania from Idaho, right? And thereby incorporating the FBI once again is deeply involved in that process because you can't. Pennsylvania authorities have no jurisdiction in the matter. They're not enforcing this warrant from Idaho or anything, and there was no warrant. So you have them invading a trash can to basically reach the preconceived conclusion is what I'm saying is the only reason to invade the trash can is because you want to make sure that you can pin it on Kohberger. Why they're pinning on Kohberger, that's a different story altogether. But you're ignoring 3 other male samples, saying this is our one sample of our one assailant, and he's the sole person who's responsible for these crimes. And as a result of that, we're going to go invade this trash can, right? Instead of questioning him 3 weeks prior. The DNA is the most important factor.
Yeah. So let's look at that process, JJ.
Yeah.
So DNA samples would have to be taken of every single one of those victims or people that were in the house, including the person that didn't die. Right.
For sure.
All their DNA would have to be put into a file and tested. Right.
Absolutely.
And then they need to see if any of the other DNA that's tested inside this house was something other than those people. Well, right. This is what I call the elimination DNA.
Yeah. So, no, you're spot on. That's for sure.
So the same thing would have to be with these other people of interest.
Yep. And they allegedly did. So they allegedly did take DNA samples from them after questioning them and asking them for a DNA sample. Meanwhile, they don't question Kohberger after identifying him on November 29th. And then they let him go across the United States. And then they go without a warrant, invade his parents' private property and seize the evidence unlawfully of this alleged DNA sample that was used to generate the family tree that was used to identify Kohberger. Meanwhile, once again, ignoring those other samples of the 3 DNA, which allegedly they did compare these other male persons of interest that they took DNA samples of in the investigatory reports, claim that they eliminated them against those 3 other samples, right? So again, they are actually testing these samples against these 3 unknown male DNA samples and then still deciding, well, these samples are no longer important. Our suspect's Kohberger. It's just like the way the Vance shoe print was thrown out the door. Like, oh, well, we couldn't find a Vance shoe in Kohberger's apartment, so that evidence is no longer important. We'll just throw that away. It's the same deal, right?
Okay, or was the size of this Vans shoe the same size that Kohberger wears, right?
I don't even. There's no clear indicator that they even determined that. Yeah,
elementary, right?
Yeah,
like he could have been wearing Vans,
right?
But he could have also burnt them in a barrel after, or put them in an incinerator.
Right.
I mean, if this is a size 9 Van footprint, and he wears a size 11.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that kind of freaking eliminates the whole Van blood footprint.
No, he's cramming his giant feet into a tiny shoe. And
I just hate
leaving only one footprint.
I hate to keep pounding back on the DNA, but I can't help it.
Yeah. No, it's great. All right.
Okay. So when they did the samples of the other 3 people of interest, what were they using to compare it or match it to? Are we talking about the same piece of contact DNA that was on the alleged button on the alleged knife sheath?
Yeah, supposedly
it would have had to been. Yeah. It would have had to been because they had no other blood DNA retrieved at the murder scene, and if they did, nobody's talking about it and nobody knows about it.
No, I mean, that's a good point. So according to the official record, it seems that there's 4 DNA samples on the scene. 3 still to this date unknown male DNA samples that, according to their own reports and filings from the state, seems to indicate that these are 3 separate DNA samples of 3 separate unknown males still to this day. Now,
so JJ, hold on. So 3 separate samples of DNA from unknown people, but not the 3 people that were person of interest. We're talking about 2 different batches of 3 people.
Why? Yeah, let me correct that. I think it was actually closer to 5 people in the persons of interest, I believe. I think it was 4 that willingly gave their DNA and 1 that didn't. It was 3 that willingly gave it and 1 that didn't. The 1 that didn't, the DNA sample was achieved by following that individual and obtaining a used cigarette butt that he threw away in a public trash can.
Okay, that's right.
Again, they focus on pointing out it was a public trash can in the documents, which again is a weird correlation between that and the unlawful seizure of the trash DNA.
Okay. So my question is though. Oh, I'm sorry, NY. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, after this, I do want to move on to something else. But no, I was just saying that reminds me of Go-Go Beach, public trash can that the DNA was found.
Yeah.
Oh, so just one more thing on DNA, then I'll let it go for now.
Oh, no, that's fine.
So they found DNA from 3 unknown people in the house.
That's the story, yes.
Okay. Not the other people that were persons of interest. I just want to make that distinction.
Right? No, you're correct. That is a good distinction. Yeah. So they took the persons of interest, compared it to the 3 unknowns and the knife sheath DNA. So the 4 total samples apparently, and none of the persons of interest matched any of those samples. Right. So again.
Okay. So my question is, what was the substrate of the DNA samples that were found in the house?
Good question.
Was it blood? Was it hair? Because if it's blood, that would be an indication of these unknown people may have injured themselves during the murders.
Exactly.
If it's nothing more than hair, that could have been on the floor, in a rug, on a counter, in the bathroom, on the toilet, pubic hair on the toilet, right? Think about that. Or in a sink, right? Yeah. If it's just hair, well, it could belong to anybody that came and went from this house. If they were partying there, we know it was a party house. It could have been people partying there, people hanging out there. people just go in there to,
Well, that's another thing. Honestly, I find it hard to believe that, like, I mean, there should have been a shit ton of DNA actually all over that.
Yes, that's my point.
There should be no shortage of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, including fingerprints, and there's no talk of fingerprints in this case. I mean, what's that about, right?
But I'm saying if the DNA that they found in the house that belongs to 3 unknown individuals is hair or something like that, okay, I can buy that.
Yeah.
I can be on board with that. But if this DNA is derived from blood samples, well, these blood samples, this DNA that's from blood samples, that could be your actual assailant.
No, absolutely.
And if this DNA doesn't match Kohberger, then that eliminates him from it.
Absolutely, Ron. I think you're spot on. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from the 3 unknown male DNA samples is that the state is ignored.
Hammer.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's spot on. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the DNA is
I never would have thought about
people
that,
that speak to the likely scenario that they're the perpetrators, right?
Okay, so if this DNA that would have been inadmissible because it was his dad's or whatever, now they got this other DNA from Kohberger, like that knife sheath better be in discovery. That knife sheath better be in evidence.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't seem to be, again, until they produce these things. I don't believe they exist.
Well, you know what? Show 5, 6, and 7 is going to be based on whatever discovery comes out. So hopefully they come out with that shit pretty quick.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Hopefully for the sake of justice in this case and the sake of quit abusing Kohberger's rights. I mean, hopefully, if you're going to charge him with capital murder, you show him the evidence. I mean, it's not a complicated process.
Yeah,
it's a very well established process. This is not new.
The defense should have had discovery a long time ago, because if discovery is the contents of the evidence you have to present in your case. If they had enough evidence to get a warrant to arrest Kohberger, and let's not even talk about grand jury because we already been over this. We beat that with a dead horse. Doesn't take anything to get indicted by a grand jury.
That horse is dead already.
However, yeah, for sure. But what I'm saying is the evidence that they had, boy, they better have something really good in discovery. And as soon as we find out what is in discovery, I am going to have a heyday with it. Just a heads up for the listeners.
Really?
Nice.
I mean, to be totally honest with you, the only way I think my opinion will change is if somehow the prosecutor just pull out some, actual real shit. Like I can't even see what
some actual
going to court. Like like I can't imagine what this is going to look like when it happens.
You would have to show me a video of Brian Kohberger.
Yeah,
not that I want to see the graphic nature of it, but like immediately following the murders.
You got to start dropping evidence.
The murder weapon, saying I'm Brian Kohberger. I just murdered these people. Okay. Have that all on videotape.
You got to start dropping.
I'm not going to believe anything at this point.
Okay, so let me tell you, I said this on Wicked Planet the other night when we were talking about these freaking Mexican aliens, right?
Oh, nice.
And I got this from a Dave Chappelle episode, right? I will believe it when there's a picture of me holding, well, I didn't say this on Wicked Planet, but holding my ID so everybody can see it's me, my buddy over here filming it, and another friend over here taking notes.
Right.
Okay, then I'll believe it. I'm telling you right now, this case is going to go nowhere. And I don't understand what the holdup is other than it screams of massive cover-up.
Yeah, no, it does for sure. And again, I think the FBI's deep involvement, they're the ones at each important pivotal point in this case and investigation. They're the ones generating the activity there. Again, be it the videos, the DNA evidence, etc. They're the ones always there doing these things. I think, again, that speaks to the greater implications of a parapolitical nature. External forces imposing themselves on this case.
And Grace just said something very simple in the chat, right?
Oh, I missed it. What was it?
We need a video of him walking in the house.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're
so
gonna pop some shit like that for me to be like, oh, damn, okay.
Yeah.
That's there should be no shortage of video footage.
Oh my God, this whole area is under surveillance, JJ. This whole area is under surveillance.
Yeah, and they're right off campus, and campus most certainly has cameras pointing outside of their property towards that roadway that is immediately in front of this home. Yeah. There's just no shortage of video surveillance. Outside the private homes of all these landlords and stuff, or even the college students, they have Ring doorbell cameras. They have the little doorbell cameras hanging outside their front door.
Okay.
From the outlet, we usually have a light bulb in.
Yeah, so JJ, I just want to apologize for getting fired up. It took me an hour and 15 minutes to get fired up, but
I like it. I like it.
But okay, who do you know that does not have cameras nowadays?
Exactly. Yeah,
Nobody.
You can get one for $12 on Amazon.
Very
I
convenient.
have so many cameras at my house. I'm afraid to do anything.
You've got yourself under so much surveillance.
Actually,
Well,
the stuff that I have to go into, actually, I think can even show why there's no footage, I think, of anything going around in that area.
I like it.
All right, NY.
NY. I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just saying.
No, that's a good segue.
That's
a good segue.
I was going to say NY. Let's get into that.
All right. First off, I mean, I guess like it was perfect how you even said a cover up. And I know, again, that's even another thing. Like, it's so funny. People may think that there's something wrong with this case, but if it's a cover up for the police are covering something up that they can't buy, I don't know how would you even make sense of the case then if the cops are whatever.
Right.
So, but
81 million people voted for Biden. Just use that as an example.
Okay. But so I do think
41 million may or may not exist.
Yeah. I do think something like that is going on. And I do, before I even bring up this stuff that I want to show, I do want to give at least a shout out to some of these channels that I did get some of this information from. And I did go a little bit farther with it, which I actually think makes their stuff even seem more weirder. Like it's definitely like, but I want to give a shout out to, I think Drip Drop, True Crime Design, and Truth and Transparency, because I think both of those two that I just mentioned previously have used her work as well. So it's kind of like a mishmash of other people's work that I'm putting together. But
sure.
This one I did find really interesting, and this makes me start to question like the whole thing with a cover-up as well. Now, this is the disaster. They did have a disaster response crime scene come in. And the reason why this really got my attention, and this is for listeners who may not have listened to my other stuff, maybe just into true crime, but I have delved into secret societies, the Masons. I've dived into the Shriners, the Jesters, the Loyal Order, the Moose, and like we've done deep dives on like companies that are attached to properties that they're attached to, and I've actually come across a crime scene company that was associated with the Moose Lodge. So I found that weird. So when I saw somebody presenting this, I just instantly thought back to that kind of.
Sure.
So that just, this caught my attention because of this. So I saw this, and here's the guy, Bew Value, which is kind of a weird name. I would almost even suggest they may not even be his real name. That might be like the LLC company, and he's actually just throwing that up. And there's funny ways to play around with shit like that. But it has Bew Value. And that is him of the disaster response team. And then it even shows here the registering agent is Bew Value at, I found this interesting, for occultism, 88 Elk Haven. 88 would also go back to HH, and 8 is kind of like Thoth symbolism. I'm not going to get all into that. It'll take too long. But then, and then the principal address is 13888. So I mean, we got a bunch of 8s with that again. State Highway 55. Now that's going to be the more important address, really, at the end. That's very weird. So that's the principal address, and that is the mailing address of Disaster Response LLC, who is at the disaster response for the Idaho 4. So then you also see that Bew Value has a couple of other things there. AMV LLC at the same address. There's 2 of those. Then there's Bew Value. I think that's BS or BB LLC. That's at the same address. Class 5 Adventures. That is at the same address. The disaster response. That's already there. He's got a bunch of companies. He's got a whole bunch. I'm not saying all of these are him. I will say I think most of the ones that are in Idaho probably are. And there are a lot of them on here that I'm showing on the screen that are still matching, like V5 Investments. That's another one that's on this list. Same address.
Most of these are active still, right? If not all of them, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of companies, at least that have been at this address at some point. And he has a whole bunch of other addresses. And again, this is things that I have seen when I have delved into the Moose Lodge, the Shriners, the Jesters. You will start seeing people with multiple LLCs at the same address. And I do think it's possibly money laundering. With this, I'm not exactly sure, but we'll just keep going.
Well, but if I may make a point real quick, Nick, that is exactly what the Bidens are being accused of right now from the congressional investigations out of the the Republican House there. They've been conducting numerous investigations, asserting that that's exactly what the Biden's been doing, opening up dozens of LLCs in which to hide money from the IRS and funnel money, conduct money laundering.
I was like, oh, it's like the stuff that me and Lux were looking at is like the same thing that the president's getting.
Right. It definitely is a common tactic. It definitely is a common tactic.
It needs to be as convoluted as possible because it sucks up a lot of investigatory time.
There you go. It makes it expensive doing research. That's very true, Ron. I never think of that.
Yeah.
Good point, Ron. Yeah.
So now I just take the address that disaster response company is on. I take the address and run that through Visipedia. You are getting Osborne's Cleaning and Restoration, Donnelly Main Street Plaza property, V5 Investments. You get the disaster results. Class V, Class 5 Adventures. A lot of those companies that I was just mentioning before by Buell Value, they're registered to that property.
And he's the registered agent on most of those as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an important detail.
Here's the property that all these companies are on.
It's a big building they have there.
It even says on Home Facts property type vacant. There is nothing there. There's supposedly mail going there for these companies. Where's the mailbox?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, who registers that many one business, let alone that many businesses, to a vacant piece of property in the middle of nowhere?
It looks like a nice office to me.
Yeah, right. I got it. It's underneath the water, Ron. We just can't see it from this.
Yeah. Oh, you know what that is? You remember Cheech and Chong when they made I think their growing field look like a pool? That's what that is.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That, right? Fuck, come on. Then real quick, this is just I'm not going to read this article. It mentions Dan Este and Scott Perky as like the co-owners of 1122 King Road. And they were just asking people to be hush hush, which is kind of a little weird to begin with, but whatever.
Well, I may interject. It is weird when you look at these people's activity too, because they just gave the house to the university, as the story's told.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This whole thing, even with the house, is shady as hell.
Because I mean, the property had value. I mean, if it's not gonna be lived in again, it's gonna be torn down. There's insurances. There's insurance, policies that may or may not cover that kind of situation where they have to tear down the home because of a murder. The university, if they're the ones so gung ho about tearing it down, you'd think maybe they're gonna pay the private landowner some money in which to do that. But it seems that they just transferred it. They said, "Here you go."
Yeah.
Well, having 4 murders happening in a house would be a deal breaker for me if I was going to buy it. I mean, unless it's like a house from the 1820s, and it's like you got to expect that.
You have to wait a bit for that.
Yeah, but good and well, Ron, the way the true crime community operates, there'd be a line, there'd be an auction.
Oh my God! Come to think of it, JJ.
Yeah,
you're probably right.
Right.
Just buy it as a tourist attraction.
I was going to say, and if you're the owner of that, I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent,
a YouTuber
money,
right? Crime would have bought that already just for the investment of the amount of money they could have made off of that.
Yeah. So I mean, there is money to be made there from a capitalistic perspective, but at the end of the day, like, why would you just give it to the university? Just you guys tear it down.
Hey,
it doesn't make any sense.
They tore down the complete apartment complex where Jeffrey Dahmer lived.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
My concerns mainly also with the destruction of this home is how they've been dead set on tearing it down since day one. For example, on December 7th, the same day that it was announced to the public that Moscow PD needed assistance locating the 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra, the same day that press release went out. Again, mind you, they already had Kohberger identified according to their documents, but the same day that press release went out, James Fry, the police chief from Moscow PD, drove the U-Haul van himself over to that house to begin emptying out all the contents. So the authorities of Idaho have wanted this house empty and gone for some time. So I think it just seems like another factor in like kind of the weird activity going around with these landlords at Nick's point now.
I'll tell you what, right now, that house needs to stay intact and up until after this trial, because this would be something that, and I know that they do this, they would take all the jurors to the scene of the crime.
Oh, they did that with the Murdoch. Yes.
Yeah. So if they wanted to get rid of this house, that just means they're looking to get rid of more evidence. Because if I was a defense attorney, or say worse, the prosecutor, I would say, okay, we're going to take all these jurors on a little field trip. We're going to take you to the scene of the crime and we're going to show you this. And we're going to go step by step to each room and explain what we believe happened in these rooms. That would be the number one reason why they would not be able to tear this house down. Because in my opinion, this house is also evidence.
No, 100%. Yeah, absolutely, Ron.
And then here we have one of the two landlords. We have Scott S. Perky. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is up on the screen if people actually want to stop and read it, or it's been up for a while. He's registered, and this does show what he actually did. If people want to read it, but I did find that weird. That's that one of them is a registered person.
How did these two fellas link up, by the way? This
right? I have no idea.
Because one's out of Colorado, right? The other one's out of Vermont.
I have no idea, though.
Yeah, that's something we can look into. And NY, I wanted to ask you if you could put links to these documents in the show notes, because I'd like to look at them later.
Sure. Yeah. And then he's also had at the same guy, Scott Perky, he's also had at that house. And it's still the mailing address, which I think is what whatever, I forgot however to say it. Truth and Transparency channel on YouTube was talking about. I think it's important to even point out this is like the mailing address too. So if this is an actual legit running business, why do you have your mail going to that house? I'm not going to trust these college kids to tell me, oh yeah, you got mail here.
Yeah, because it's not like it's not like it's a PO box, right? Which would be something that a lot of LLCs will use a PO box.
These kids can't take their faces out of their phone. I'm gonna have 10 months worth of mail there before they even tell me.
Well, what I can do is I'll look at the Idaho Secretary of State website and pull the actual documents here for this business to see what has been going on with the software. Maybe there's been various address changes. Maybe he originally had it, registered to 1122 King and only recently put it back there. Maybe there's some other addresses maybe it's registered in between.
Yeah, that's a possibility. And then you have Dan Este, who's the other guy, or however you say his name. He does have 1122 King LLC. And now I think he does own other houses around that property. And then these houses have the address King LLC in there.
There's another address there, NY. What is it? 1118 King. That would indicate to me possibly another piece of property that would be in close proximity to this the 1122, right? So 1118, that would actually be like 2 houses down.
Yeah, then you have 1119, 1126, I think that is 1127. And then he does have a couple of other companies, 2 or 3 other companies. But I think it was True Crime Design. They actually took the time to show you where the houses were, and it was practically surrounding that house.
I was going to say, this is all the same neighborhood.
What I think occurred there was, if I remember correctly, looking at the property records, this fella or preceding people that he purchased these properties from had taken the original parcel and divided it into numerous parcels and built numerous structures. So that's why you have this. That's also why you have the police confused on their body camera footage going to a home that has a King Street address while it physically sits on Queen, because it was the backside of that parcel, that original parcel. So 1122 King actually physically sits on Queen. You see what I'm saying? That road you come in the driveway is actually Queen, but the actual original piece of property, the parcel, which all this was divided into, is on King. So, but that's why you see here is they divided it into different parcels and built different homes on that original property. And they're each individually, these are individually registered as one business. However, he manages these things out of Colorado, out of one property management company.
Yeah, and that would make sense, JJ. That one piece of property would be bought and subdivided into building lots.
Yeah, there's a reasonable purpose for these LLCs versus the Bow Value LLCs, which seem extreme and without any property, actual office property.
No, agreed.
These actually have location. You can look up locations. You can look up the Colorado location of the property management company. So while there may be other elements that seem funky here, these, to me at least, these LLCs seem,
semi-legit.
They seem to have a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, because a couple of
Just to
these
draw a
LLCs address
comparison.
matches, because you got the two here from the 297 Cascadia Street, and then you got the you see we got three there, and then we got one that's 1120 Claremont Drive in Boulder. These other ones are in Crested Butte, Colorado. That might be close to Boulder. Yeah, no, this I don't think. I mean, it is odd to have a separate LLC for each single piece of property, but from a business person's standpoint, I can see why that they did that.
Yeah, because if you have something that happens at 1122 King, you don't want someone of an incident there suing you and it affecting your property over 1126 King.
It's to separate all them
liability.
separately for liability for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, but all the other ones that link back to that field, like that's a totally different situation. That is sketchy, like for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. That was my point. You're pointing out these sound like they have a purpose because those other ones don't.
Again, what I guess with playing the conspiracy side, that could also be a reason why you have no footage. Because if this guy is involved with I'm starting to think possibly drugs again with this situation.
That's a great point. That may be why we don't have
the house or involved in it. Yeah, he's involved with a whole lot of other houses around there, and there's no. No, it's just I'm looking at it. If this person or the owner is actually involved with what was going on in that house, that's why I think this might actually tend to
because they can
cover up the whole system, the whole thing.
Right, but in the case of some type of civil forfeiture, they would only be able to take that one piece of property versus all of his properties. So that makes sense. Which just also now that we say that this is kind of legit. But in another sense, is what was the motive to separate all these properties, other than maybe protection, like you say, JJ, liability, but it would also be to protect yourself in case of some form of mass arrest. Oh, we're going to seize all your properties that were involved in these drug transactions. When a good lawyer could come back and say, well, no, you can seize the one that was involved.
Exactly.
But you have no right to seize all the other ones.
That falls under that liability umbrella of liability that they're shielding themselves from by doing this. That's a good point. And Nick, I agree with you. I think that's a good reason why we don't have security camera footage from the nearby properties, that some of which are on that list that is owned by the same landlord, that clearly have cameras out in front of their home. I mean, they reference one of those cameras in the actual arresting affidavit, saying that whatever it is at 4:17, there's a loud thump followed by a dog barking.
That's right. Yes,
So we know cameras exist. We know the footage exists.
Supposedly somebody was running away from the scene.
Yeah. So that is a good point. If it's one landlord that is owning these properties, that recorded some of this footage, he's going to be. It's not the tenants that make the decision in that environment. It's going to be the person who owns the property, whether or not that video footage is going to police in the first place.
Yeah, somebody in the chat just had a comment that Crested Butte is a long ways away from Boulder.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, just FYI.
And there may be some more mysterious aspects of the registry of some of his businesses there.
Again, I think, you know what? I'm just going to go back to it real quick, and I wasn't going to read it, but I forgot. I think it does mention it in here. Daily Mail reported co-owners Dan Estee and Scott Perkey, who now reside in Colorado. So, okay. I mean,
why did the Daily Mail only give them three options? They must either demolish the home, turn it into a memorial, or clean it up and rent it out once more. Why can't they sell it? Yeah. Why is Daily Mail making these decisions of what to do with this home?
Some of those properties, I mean, those companies that I was showing before that I said I wasn't totally sure about, were also registered to Colorado.
Interesting.
So could that have still have been them?
Yeah, very possible. No, and again, if this is a drug distribution house, which all records, reports, and witness statements seem to indicate, and it has been for many years, dating back to when these fellows may or may not have acquired this property. Back at, what was Perky's date there, 1999, that he registered that computer business. I would say, from my indication, from my research, it seems to indicate that predominantly fraternity brothers have been residing in that home dating back to 1999. And in more recent years, sorority girls have been residing in that home. But it has been a Greek Greek community home and on the University of Idaho campus or just slightly off campus for over 20 years. So if there is this long-term, and these folks, these owners have been associated with it that long, right? So if there is this long-term drug distribution point, I would expect scumbags to own that property, right? Now, Perky's associations go back with that to 1999. That conviction for the diddling wasn't until 2016. So he's probably been involved in a lot of other suspect and unscrupulous behavior throughout that time. But I would expect a landlord to own a drug distribution house, such as what we've inferred here, to be somebody of that kind of character and nature is this Perky fellow.
Yeah. See, like, again, like, the reason why I did bring some of this stuff up is that I think when you start looking at everything that we were just talking about, tunnels under there, I do try to, as silly as it sounds, I do think that's something interesting to talk about. If you start thinking about drugs and then you see all these houses all being owned by the same person in the same area, very convenient because there's a tunnel near there. It's just like, all this stuff together, you just start to wonder, like, what the hell are we really looking at? Actually?
That is a good question. I keep asking myself that exact question. What the hell are we really looking at here? Because, again, at the core of it, there's obviously the 4 homicides, but there's so much more going on.
Yeah.
This has got a lot of tentacles for sure. Hey, listen, guys, I hate to do this to you, but I got to take off. Again, I could sit here for another hour and talk about this for sure. But, I got some family obligations that are coming home very soon. So I just want to thank you guys for having me on. I'll obviously be in contact with you very shortly. And looking forward to, because again, we're far from done on this deal.
Oh, of course. And just make sure, let everybody know where they find your stuff again.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Ron from New England or the Wicked Planet Podcast. Sorry, and you can listen to the Wicked Planet Podcast wherever you find podcasts. So come and check me out. And thank you, JJ and NY, for having me on once again.
Blast.
It's always a good time. Sometimes I got to take things in, but then I get fired up on something.
I loved it.
So,
made some
points.
But
anyways, and I want to thank everybody in the chats too that have been kind of putting their 2 cents in. So we really appreciate that too. But you guys continue on. I'll finish watching this tonight.
Awesome. All right.
And I'll talk to you guys real soon because I got to go get ready for a hurricane.
All right. Yeah. Go take care of yourself, man.
Stay safe there, Ron.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you later.
All right. Be good, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I guess, I'll bring up one other thing that I think is actually interesting and something I want to talk about. Because I was, I was like, I'll just wrap it up now. But there is something that I do think is very interesting, and there's multiple aspects, I think, about it. This coroner, the coroner, right? We never kind of really got.
Is it Kathy my butt?
Yes. I mean, there's a few interesting things where you will see her say that they actually normally don't do autopsies and that they actually have like contracts with other companies to actually do that.
Yeah, that happened in this case too. Because she's not a doctor. She's not a pathologist.
But then the captain said that we did the autopsy on TV.
Well,
but then yet she even says they didn't.
Both are kind of correct. So what happened was, this happens with her for any case because she's a registered nurse. So in some jurisdictions, Idaho being one of them, you can either be a cop, a registered nurse, or a doctor. And in this circumstance, she's a registered nurse. For example, the coroner in the 2017 Las Vegas shooting event, the Harvest Festival event situation, the coroner for Clark County at that time wasn't even a nurse or a doctor. He was a cop. So certain jurisdictions have those rules where you can have those people who are not necessarily qualified per se serving the role as the coroner, which I don't necessarily agree with because these people are making determinations in the cause of death. They're not the ones conducting the autopsies, but they're the ones making the final determination. They're the ones signing the paper. So the autopsy for the homicide, the quadruple homicide here from the students, the 4 college students, that was conducted up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, up there on the north side of the state, near right across the border from Spokane, Washington. So I believe that's where Ann Taylor comes from Kunatai County. She's the chief public defender up there. So she's probably the chief public offender for a lot of people in the political situation in Idaho, because I imagine she's pissing a lot of people off. But that's where they did the autopsies here. But yeah, Kathy Mabud isn't really qualified to do much, in my opinion, other than, produce carbon dioxide, I guess.
And she's even gone to that college, and isn't she involved with that college too?
So she's a University of Idaho graduate, much like many other characters in this whole saga. She's a I'm sorry, I think she's an RN and a defense attorney, both, if I remember the record. So she's and not only that is she's also you don't need to be an attorney to be a coroner, but you do need to be the RN. But she's also an attorney. She's a criminal defense attorney, and for some reason she's allowed to be elected to coroner, and then also still continue serving in private practice as a criminal defense attorney, which I find to be a bit odd.
Oh, you know what? I actually wrote down some stuff about her. I didn't think I wrote down that much, and I'll just read it off just to.
Yeah.
All right. She was a defense attorney and coroner at Gritman or something like that medical center. She's also an alumni and faculty member at the University of Idaho. She took political science and got her law degree at the University of Idaho in 2001. Yep. And one thing that I thought was interesting, and I think maybe Jorm can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think it was True Crime Design that was kind of showing some emphasis on this lady, and they were showing kind of like info about her from a site online, and I caught it. And I guess maybe they're not into occultism, or they just missed it themselves. But in the same article that actually states all this information about her, it does mention that she's also a Lions Club member.
Oh, interesting.
And that caught my attention. I was like, And the Lions Club was formed by Melvin Jones on June 7th in 1917. And Melvin Jones stated his intention was that the Lions Club would be masonry without the apron.
Interesting.
He was a high-level Mason, having been initiated into the Garden City Lodge, number 141 in Chicago, Illinois, in 1904. And the Lions,
they're definitely a fraternal order, secret society type organization.
And they also are. The Lions Club is also very known for dealing and donating with eyeball stuff. You really want to start getting into occultism, which is about the eyes.
No, I've got some of your series on that. That is a very interesting topic of conversation.
So, I mean, all those things I think True Crime Design was showing, I was like, damn it, you missed the Lions Club. But, when I started getting into some of the other things that I covered in other shows, like the whole gematria and showing like the 33 and stuff, it's just like, to me, that caught my attention because I was like, well, now here we have a possible, kind of an offshoot of Masonry.
It very much seems like it. Yeah.
Case now.
Yeah, it certainly seems to fall within that umbrella of that same network. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, if I can leave you with this, and folks of the interwebs leave you with this fun fact from this case, this whole environment. I think I messaged you about this recently, Nick. This whole environment kind of has, because I know you're interested in the series Twin Peaks. This whole environment seems to have a very Twin Peaks-like atmosphere to this town. It really does.
Oh, yeah.
All these people know each other, right? They're all connected to one another. They all went to the University of Idaho. All the principal people involved in the prosecution of this case are all University of Idaho alums, from the principal investigating detective, Brett Payne, to the coroner, Kathy Mabut, to the chief of police, James Fry. And then you look at James Fry, his wife is the clerk of courts for Latah County. And, many people think the judges have the most power inside a courthouse, but it's really not. It's the clerk of courts. They're the ones who the judges just work there. The clerk of court is really who's responsible for that facility and the activities that transpire within it. And this is notable in cases such as the Murdahl case out of South Carolina recently, where that clerk of court from that county is in a whole lot of trouble because what she did was a bunch of unlawful activities incriminating that Murdahl fella to the jury, because she's got to give the jury instructions as the clerk of court, and she apparently was giving them a little bit too much instruction, if you will, and so that's how much power these clerk of courts have, and that's James Fry's wife. So just, you know what I mean? The chief of police that was trying to raid the murder home and all the evidence in it on December 7th when they didn't even have a suspect, let alone have a clue. You know what I mean? He's literally driving the U-Haul to empty the place. His wife is the clerk of courts, And then you look at folks like the private driver who dropped off Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan to the even the judge's wife works at the. Yeah, there you go. Even judge's wife works at the university. It's a very Twin Peaks like atmosphere, according to
Wow. That is
the
fucked
chat.
up.
But so the private driver, he works for the university. The private driver that dropped off the kids, or Madison Mogan, the young adults, Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez, ostensibly the last party to see them alive outside of their own roommates, perhaps. That dude's wife works for Moscow PD. So he works for the university, the driver does. His wife works for the PD, right, in an administrative function. Right, she's not an officer, but she works for the PD. So again, it's a very Twin Peaks like atmosphere.
Yeah,
I know you're going to enjoy that reference because I know you like Twin Peaks.
Yeah, no, that's a really great way to put it, actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
it'd be too much to get into now, but like even occultism wise, I could see ties between Twin Peaks and this.
Nice.
That's very weird that
nice.
you said that. It's a good match. But JJ, thank you very much for coming on and for staying up to entertain that little thing about the coroner or whatever.
No, I like it. I always like talking about Kathy my butt.
Yeah, right. Just the name.
Yeah, right.
Let everybody know, just in case they didn't catch it at the beginning, but your links are in the bottom anyway. Let everybody know what you're about and what you got going on. What show you got.
JJ Vance, thanks again for joining us here for this discussion, folks of the interwebs. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at operation_GCD, on Twitter /X Twixter. You can find me at OperationGCD, OperationGCD@gmail.com if you want to reach out to me there. And again, I'll send you the link to my Substack where I'm putting all these Idaho thoughts and notions I have into a more cogent site picture and analysis of the case on a Substack entitled "An Isolated Targeted Attack." Because again, that's
that to me. I saw that. I think you might have sent me that link. I was like, "Oh,
did I already send you the link?" Okay.
Yeah,
you want to add that to the show notes? What's that?
Yeah, that it looks good too.
Oh, nice. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I posted an introduction up there. I'm going to continue posting bi-weekly posts. We'll begin charging for the subscription to that. For the first couple chapters, will be free.
Nice. All right, I'll leave a link in there. When I get off of here, I'll add it in. And
thanks for the invite, Nick. Enjoyed the conversation. I wish Ron didn't have to skip out early, but I understand. And you both provided some excellent points, I think, in the discussion today, and
especially with
and brought some new ideas. Got my wheels turning on a couple topics. So
yeah. You brought up some good questions for sure.
Nice.
And that is the end of another NY Patriot show. Again, thank you for all the people in the chat and all the people that checked out the live. I really appreciate it. That's why I try to go live so people in the chat can join in. And I do say it a lot that if I happen to go live and you're even rewatching it, you're watching a little live, check out the chat that goes on during the live. Sometimes there is a lot of information that's in there, And,
oh, nice. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Definitely. It's the lives definitely. The people who were commenting, they normally got some good stuff to add.
That's a different chat section, right? You have the live chat section, then you have the comment section.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, completely different. Yeah,
it's a different section. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. So for people in the chat, again, thank you very much. And that's it. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.